Ezra, the sixth chapter. We need to finish out the sixth chapter and move into the seventh chapter. Israel was carried away. Well, first of all, Assyria took over part of Israel, and then Babylon came years later and took over Israel. And when Babylon came, they took exile, they took folks away with them, and they took everything basically that wasn't nailed down. They ravaged in many ways the land and left everybody destitute. After Babylon took over in 606, and 586 was the ultimate takeover, but 606 is basically when they were in charge of, if you will. And then the Medo-Persians came in. The Persians is usually what we refer to them as, but it's actually Midianites and the Persians together. But it is in that time frame in which Ezra is written. The first king, Cyrus, allows for Zerubbabel to lead a group of people, some almost, not quite, 50,000 individuals, to go back and rebuild the temple. It had been pretty much destroyed. Everything had been taken out of it. Babylonians had pretty much destroyed it. And so it was their charge to go back, rebuild the temple. And as in most good works, there was opposition. And Zerubbabel met that opposition, but one of the things with regards to that opposition was, well, did the king okay this? Years had passed, and sure enough, they found out, yes, the king got okay. They got word back that the king had okayed the rebuilding of the temple. And not only had the king decreed such, but also, as we were closing last week, he had decreed that there would be those that would give the necessary supplies, sacrifices that would be made by the children of Israel. And so we're getting to the end of this little venture, if you will, and we still need the last few verses of the sixth chapter because the temple is completed and the temple is dedicated. Now, as I've said before in this study, and it's my belief, and it's only my belief. I mean, so in other words, you can take it for what it's worth. You can throw it out if you want to, and that's fine too. But that Ezra was really acting more as a historian in this book. He tells about Zerubbabel. He tells about who all Zerubbabel brings back. He's more interested in preserving the history of Israel for Israel. And so he talks. He says, beginning in chapter 6, verse 13, he says, then Tattenai, governor of the region beyond the river, Sethar, Boznai, and their companions diligently did according to what King Darius had sent. So the elders of the Jews built, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai and the prophet and Zechariah, the son of Iddo, and they built and finished it according to the commandments of God of Israel and according to the command of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. Let's stop right there. Here we have them coming back, just as they were told, and it says that they built, and it really gives us four reasons as far as why they were able to complete the building or the rebuilding of the tabernacle. Notice it says in verse 14, it says the elders built and they prospered. They were successful. Well, what was it that led to their success? First of all, the elders, the Jews built. They built. They didn't sit there. They didn't say, oh, poor is me. Now, remember, if you remember, and he goes on in the second one says the prophesying of Haggai and the prophet and Zechariah. We told you that Haggai and Zechariah, from a standpoint of time frame, fit this time frame. They were the two post-exilic prophets, minor prophets, that simply put, basically told Israel, Haggai especially, get out of your house. You've sat in your houses, you've sat in them too long, get out of your houses and get to work. Zechariah takes a little different approach. He sees more of the hope of the future and tells them about that. But his message really is get up, get to go and rebuild. And they rebuild. And so that's the second, if you will, the encouragement of others, especially men of God and prophets, allowed them to be able to complete the project. Then thirdly, it says that they built it, finished it, excuse me, according to the commandments of God of Israel. They listened to what God had to say. And when you listen to what God has to say, God has promised, I'll be with you. I'll take care of you. I'll make sure that you're a success. Remember in the book of Joshua, when we studied that in Joshua chapter 1, some of my favorite verses, and I've got a lot, I know, but some of my favorite verses are Joshua 1, verses 1 through 9. And if you go back to Joshua 1, 1 through 9, Joshua is taking over. Moses died. Joshua is taking over the leadership of the children of Israel. And first thing God tells him is don't fear, be of good courage, don't be afraid. And then as he goes on, he talks about have not only courage, but have the courage of conviction to stand up for what's right. Don't turn, as Joshua was told, don't turn to the right or don't turn to the left. And then he tells there in verse 8 and verse 9, he says, follow the commands of God. And if you do these things, you will have success. Well, the same principle can apply today, and the same principle applied in Ezra's day as well, although many years removed, of course, from Joshua. They did the commandments of God. And then the fourth thing is they did according to the command of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, the kings. And it's interesting, it says king of Persia, but it should say kings. Plural is not used by Ezra. Don't know why, but nevertheless, these were the three men. Remember last week, I believe it was, if it wasn't the week before, but remember there were those that came and asked if they could help in rebuilding. And they said, well, no, because the king has said, just us, we can only rebuild. And so they listened and did what they were supposed to do, and they had success. Now, he says in verse 15, the temple was finished on the third day of the month of Adar, which was the 6th year of the reign of Darius. That would put it around 516 BC. Now, not that you're going to hold that number in your head, but if you just hold on to it for a minute, and I'll give you a comparison here in just a minute. But in 516 BC, the temple is rebuilt. It's finished. And the children of Israel, the priests and Levites, and the rest of the descendants of the captivity celebrated the dedication of this house of God with joy. They offered sacrifices at the dedication of the house of God. 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and a sin offering for all Israel. 12 male goats according to the number of the tribes of Israel. They assigned the priests to the divisions and the Levites to their divisions over the services of God in Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses. Now the temple was key, right? The temple was where they worshiped. The temple was their gathering place, but it was where they worshiped. There was always the sign of the presence of God, and not just the presence of God, but the help of God. And it was a place of spiritual blessing for the children of Israel. The temple was important. I mean, stop and think about, heaven forbid, God forbid, ever what you want to say, if something happens to this building, what are we going to do? What would we do? The temple was the place of worship, the place where God was seen as being, and their spiritual well-being was connected to the temple. And so they were greatly pleased when the temple was rebuilt. They had this dedication. They offered these great feasts or these great sacrifices, excuse me. They began then, notice what he says in verse 18. They assigned the priests to the divisions and the Levites to their divisions over the service of God in Jerusalem. In other words, they began to put the priests back in action. The priests have been sitting around doing nothing for quite a few years. And now they're told to get up and get going and offer the sacrifices and fulfill the daily, the weekly, the yearly mandatory sacrifices and service that they were to give into the temple. And so they did. The descendants of the captivity kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. For the priests and the Levites, they purified themselves. All of them were ritually clean. And they slaughtered the Passover lambs for all the descendants of the captivity, for their brethren, the priests, and for themselves. Then the children of Israel who had returned from captivity ate together with all who had separated themselves from the filth of the nations of the land in order to seek the Lord God of Israel. And they kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with joy, for the Lord made them joyful and turned the heart of the king of Syria toward them to strengthen their hands in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. Now, there's a few things in there that are interesting, at least to me, as I look at these verses. It says that they began, the priests began. They first of all, they had to purify themselves. Go back to the old law, go back to the book of Leviticus and find out where it talks about purification and purification rites and practices of cleansing yourself if you were considered impure. Notice this was a ceremonial impurity. This was not just an impurity from the standpoint of an illness, a sickness, or a sin, but it was considered a ceremonial purity or ceremonial cleansing that had to be made. And so they were ritually, they were clean. They made their sacrifices. The Passover lamb was taken and offered as a sacrifice. They also kept, according to verse 22, the feast of the unleavened bread. The feast of the unleavened bread, remember, was a 7 day, as he said, a 7 day feast in which you could say holiday, for lack of a better term, but it was a festival that was kept 7 days. One of the big things about that is that you did not have leaven in your house. You got rid of it before the festival, and it remained out of your food, out of your cooking, the whole 7 days. It was a reminder, the festival, the reason for the festival was a reminder of the children of Israel, because remember, when they left, when they were leaving Egypt, they left quickly, and they didn't have time to gather, and they didn't have time to carry away. And that's what the Feast of Unleavened Bread was supposed to do. It was supposed to be a reminder, a celebration of the time in which Israel departed from Egyptian bondage. And it was kept, and it was always, notice what it says in verse 22, it says they kept the Feast of the Unleavened Bread 7 days with joy. It was always, that festival was always a joyous occasion. So they're getting back into the routine of what they're supposed to do. They're getting back into the routine of being people of God. And it also says then that they strengthened their hands in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. They began, the idea to strengthen their hands means that they encouraged them. The priest began to encourage the people began to encourage the priest. It works sort of, if you will, in conjunction with each other. They're just beginning to get back to being what they're supposed to do. Now, I will say this. It is kind of strange. You look there in verse 22. It mentions the king of Assyria. And you might say, well, now I've been following everything you said. And first of all, you had Assyria, and then you had Babylon. And then Persia came and basically let them have this freedom to rebuild. So why did they mention Assyria and not Babylon? We have no clue. Now, I can give you some things that scholars have said through the years, such as the scribe wrote the wrong name, put the wrong place. It could be that. It could be the fact that Assyria, the title of Assyria was used as a title for all of the land, even after Persia had come. So that they skipped Babylon in many ways. It could be that Assyria, remember, they captured Israel, the Divided Kingdom. They were the first to capture Israel, so to speak. And so they were always used. We don't really know why. What we do know is that it does say it here. And is it a problem from a historical standpoint? No. He's just saying that you need to understand that they turned away from their captives' ways and they turned back to God. So it's a time of restoration, but more reformation in many ways. It's a time of going back. It's a time of doing God's will and getting back to what's done and what should be done. Anything else in this chapter? Anything that interests you?
Interesting that the 10 tribes have basically disappeared now.
Yep.
But when they offered the sacrifices, they did it for all 12 tribes.
Yes.
Like Israel was still in existence.
Yeah. That's another anomaly that, we don't know. I do think Warden in his commentary was interesting. He said that he thought maybe, and like I say, this was his thinking, that even though, like say, Assyria had taken over Israel and long before this, that they were still considered brotherhood, part of the, as we would say, part of the brotherhood. But he said, I don't know. And I think that's the best answer. Don't know, but it is interesting. Yeah.
It always talks about a remnant Israel.
Yep. Very much so. Very much so. Very good. Anything else? Okay. In your mind, put a period right there at the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7, you might say, well, that's a new chapter. That's a new leaf. Between chapter 6, the events of chapter 6, maybe we should say, between the events of chapter 6 and the events of chapter 7 is 60 years. In other words, right after chapter 6, chapter 7 doesn't follow. If you want to try to put anything in there, what happened in those 60 years, we really don't know. But you can put the book of Esther in there. Time-wise, that fits in between chapter 6 and chapter 7 in that 60 years. Other than that, we really don't know what went on. And so what happens now is Ezra's leading a return. Remember, as we've said before, you have, when children of Israel taken away in Babylonian captivity, and then Persia came and took over Babylon, you have 3 courses of, for lack of a better term, returns. You have Zerubbabel's return, we just saw that. You have Ezra's return, which is the rest of the book of Ezra, and then you have Nehemiah's return. Nehemiah is fairly soon after Ezra's return, but that's kind of the time frame. I've studied with you before the book of Nehemiah, and so we've studied that. We didn't study it, I guess, probably chronologically. We just wanted to study the book because it's a good book on a lot of issues. But that's time frame. That helps maybe get you chronologically where you are. Now, what we have is Ezra, and Ezra talking about Ezra. And Ezra is going to, first of all, arrive in Jerusalem. He's going to bring several guys with him. This is part of or the reason I say that I feel like Ezra was trying to be a historian. If you recall, back in the early chapters, back in the first chapter and the second chapter, when Zerubbabel started coming back, Ezra listed a lot of the dignitaries that came with Zerubbabel. He's fixing to do that now with himself. Let's go. Now, after these things, in the reign of Artaxerxes. Now, remember, we said the temple was finished in 516, right? Artaxerxes was somewhere, his reign was 465 to 424, somewhere around 458. Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Ezra, the son of Shreai, I'm going to get it right in a minute. Sarai is how you say it. The son of Azariah, the son of Hilkiah, the son of Shalom, the son of Zadok, the son of Ahitub, the son of Amariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Marioth, the son of Zeriah, son of Uzziah, son of Buki or Bukai. And all this depends on how you break the syllable itself. Son of Abishai, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, chief priest. This Ezra, he narrowed it down, but think about who he got his lineage to. Who to get it to? Mary, no. Aaron. He got it to Aaron, yes. Who? Moses' brother. He got it to do what? To show that he was what? It's going to say later on. He's a priest. So Ezra, what he's showing you in from a standpoint of literary, all of that, and that's just a lot of names that, most of them, we really don't know who they are. But what he's showing is, first of all, he's showing lineage, which was very important. But he's also showing what authority he has. He's showing that he is really a man of God that can serve God in a role. And like I say, he's going to say in a few minutes that he's a priest, so we're not jumping the gun, so to speak. But these are the folks, kinfolks. Ezra came up from Babylon. He was skilled scribe, law of Moses, which the Lord God of Israel had given. Now, think about that. He's a skilled scribe. Scribes were the individuals that taught the law, they copied the law, they didn't make the law, but they were the teachers. And evidently, the best we can tell from the Hebrew words that are used when it says skilled scribe, that he was a teacher with pretty good ability. But remember, it's Ezra writing this. So whether this is a title that somebody gave him or whether it is something that he felt for himself, we find out that he's a skilled scribe. And I think the text bears that out, that he was. Don't get me wrong. But then he tells us really why he came to Jerusalem. Why did you go? Because Ezra, remember this. Remember when we talked about Zerubbabel leading the people back, that he could only get 50,000, a little less really, to go back with him. And we talked about how the folks had established their families there. They had established business there. They just didn't want to leave. So Ezra is leading the group now. And you say, well, why did they go back? The temple's built, so the people that are there should be happy. Leave us alone. But here's what he says. The king granted him all his requests according to the hand of the Lord his God upon him. Think about this. Now there's one more that's going to come about into play, but it says king said he could go, number one. Number two, he evidently made a request to go. He felt something, he felt a burning. If you would allow me to use Jeremiah 6, Jeremiah talked about why he preached the truth, even in the time and in the midst in a world that didn't want to listen. Jeremiah said there was a fire in his bones. There's somehow, probably in Ezra's bones, if you will, a fire. Want to go back, want to go back to my homeland, want to go back, make sure the temple worship is what it should be. The people are where they should be. So he makes a request. So there's the second reason. According to the hand of the Lord is God upon him. So the third reason he probably went back to Jerusalem is because he felt as if this is what God wanted him to do. Now, if you go down to verse 10, there's a fourth reason, and that is Ezra prepared his heart. We'll talk about that when we get there. But notice that it says, according to the hand of the Lord, is God upon him. Notice that, the hand of the Lord, it's 3 times in this chapter that Ezra makes that statement. And so he says, you need to know this was something God wanted him to do, evidently. Some of the children of Israel, verse 7, some of the children of Israel, the priests, the Levites, singers, the gatekeepers, the Nethinims came up to Jerusalem in the 7th year of Artaxerxes. Now let's break this down. We understand some of the children of Israel. We understand the priests. We understand who the Levites were. We understand the singers. The gatekeepers may throw us a little bit. The gatekeepers were the Levites that were in charge of the temple entrance, who came in and who didn't come in. It was, for lack of a better term, it was a closed society. It was not open to anybody and everybody. Not everybody could get into the temple. That wasn't for just any nation or any people. And the gatekeepers, nope, you can't come in. Nope, you can't come in. And then the Nethinims were the temple servants that were assigned to the Levites to assist the Levites, especially in the offering of sacrifices. So what you have here is children of Israel, and then those that were in the temple, those that would serve in the temple. Ezra, verse 8, came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. On the 1st day of the 1st month, he began his journey from Babylon, and on the 1st day of the 5th month, he came to Jerusalem according to the good hand of his God upon him. There's an interesting aspect to this, and that is that as a crow flies, this trip is only about 500 miles and shouldn't have taken that many months to get there. You figure a group, well, a day's journey, biblically speaking, a day's journey was considered 20 miles. Now, granted, you're carrying a group with you, so that slows you down a little bit. There was a possibility of another route that was 900 miles that they could have taken. But the difficulty with that is that was a more dangerous route. Why did it take him so long to get 500 miles? Don't know. Maybe they stopped a while. Maybe they saw the sights. They went sightseeing. It doesn't say. They ran. Yeah, they ran into the buggies. They followed some drivers. I was behind a driver today that was very confused, and it was a foreigner. I hate to say that, but it wasn't a foreigner. They were from Kentucky because they had Kentucky license plates. That's a foreigner. And they could not drive, bless their hearts. I was telling Suzanne, so they had several troubles. But anyway, yes.
Maybe traffic was bad.
Traffic was bad. Interstate was bad. Interstate, I have no clue. Yeah, animals everywhere. Well, one of the things that I thought about as I was looking at this and studying and reading what some said, it's a group, large group, and it's kind of hard to get everybody going in the mornings. I don't know why. Nobody knows why, but we have to, or we don't. Well, you don't have to, but I do believe. I believe the time frame of Ezra. It's just that it took this long to go.
When you
this route.
look on down just a little bit farther in the chapter,
Yeah.
you'll see that he had an edict from the king.
Yeah.
Anything you want, you see it, you take it.
Yeah.
Well, I could spend 5 months picking up all silver and gold in a 500-mile route.
Yeah.
It takes me a little while to do that too.
Yeah. And that was one of the assumptions or suppositions that somebody that I read made. I don't know, but yeah, very true. Very true. Could be. good book. And some of the things we're going to see that they had, especially in the treasury, when you get down to verse 21, 22, we'll talk about the large amount. So yeah, don't know why, but nevertheless, and it really doesn't matter, but I want to make that point because you get to reading other books about the Bible, somebody may raise that question and might wonder, well, why didn't Brother Paul cover that? He did. Verse 10 then. For Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord, to do it, and to teach statutes and ordinances in Israel. Ezra had 3 resolutions, if you stop and think about it. First thing that he did, though, is he prepared his heart. That's the ultimate key. That he prepared his heart. He got this. It's sort of like when I was growing up, my dad had a large garden, and I always helped him in the garden. And one of the things you had to do, especially in early springs, you started having to get the ground ready. You had to break the ground up, and usually because where we lived in the garden, there were fields around us, and so the farmer that would break up the ground would also disc up our garden for us. And so we're grateful for that. But then, of course, you'd have to get the tiller in, you'd have to work it up, and you prepare the ground. You get ready before you ever get started. A lot of us just jump in. But Ezra prepares, and then there were 3 things that he did. First of all, he prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord, to go after it, also to do what it says in it. He wasn't just going to read it and go his way. He was going to read it and do what it said. And then thirdly, he was going to teach the statutes. He was going to share it with others. He wasn't just going to hold it to himself. He was going to share it with others. This was his mission. This was his message. This was his reason. And I think this was ultimately the 4th reason why he decided to come back. So if you look in verse 6, he kind of gives us the first 3 reasons why he came back. And the 4th reason is found in verse 10 is because he prepared his heart. Oh, man. Okay. Well, the best thing I know to do really is to stop right there. There is a letter from Artaxerxes. That is what makes up really the rest of, or the vast majority of chapter 7. Now, if you want to study further, as you get through chapter 7, you'll find out that Ezra praises God for everything that's done. Ezra then is going to give us a list of families in the 8th chapter. These people came with him. And really beginning in the end of the 7th chapter and going through the 15th verse of the 9th chapter, a lot of folks call it Ezra's memoirs. Ezra talks about himself and what he did and the importance of why he did what he did. Anything else? It's all good. Appreciate your contribution, your comments. Always, I enjoy a class with comments and questions and statements because I learn a lot from everybody. Yes. Well, let's bow forward and pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the blessing of it, for the opportunity to study your word. We thank you for men such as Ezra, for his spiritual renewal and reformation of the folks of that day, for the example that it sets before us to show us that we too, that do not need to sit on our laurels, but we need to be folks that are constantly moving forward and constantly following you and your will and doing as you would have us to do. We ask that you be with those that were mentioned earlier in our announcements that are going through difficult times, those that are sick. We ask that you be with them, that you bless them and keep them. We ask that you be with Adriano, bless him, bless his work. We're thankful for the good work that he's doing, and we ask that your blessings upon him and his family at this time. Be with us as we go throughout the rest of this week. Help us to be the example that we need to be the light that shines before others. Watch over us, bless us, and keep us. Forgive us of our sins, for this is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Y'all have a great week. We'll start right there next week. Thank y'all.